Gusto ko happy ka.
Gusto ko happy ka.
Gusto ko happy ka.
Gusto ko happy kayong lahat. Gusto ko happy ka.
Gusto ko happy ka. Iyan po ang campaign slogan ng ating Senate President nung siya ay kandidato pa noong 2010 elections. Bumenta po iyan. Marami pong sumakay dyan. Pero ang nakakalungkot, sa pagpatakbo ng Senado, malayo ito sa katotohanan. Kasi po, ang kalakaran talaga dito ay kung gusto ko, isasagasa ko. Kung ayaw ko, uupuan ko.
I'm not like that. Is there any instance where I ask you or any one of you to vote according to my wishes?
Mr. President,
I'm asking you a question.
That's irrelevant from this. I can cite several instances.
You know, it's irrelevant because
Yes.
you are telling falsehoods here. I was the one who took you out of the rut where you were imprisoned in Camp Crame. I never did this before. I went out of my way to talk to people so that you can get back here in the Senate, and I guaranteed your presence here. But I'm not saying this because
Precisely
I want
you're
you
saying
to.
it, Mr.
Oh,
President. I was supposed to call in sick again today, but somebody called me a coward last Monday, so here I am. Anyway, this is my privileged speech. Gusto ko happy ka. Iyan po ang campaign slogan ng ating Senate President nung siya ay kandidato pa noong 2010 elections. Bumenta po iyan. Marami pong sumakay dyan. Pero ang nakakalungkot, sa pagpatakbo ng Senado, malayo ito sa katotohanan. Kasi po, ang kalakaran talaga dito ay kung gusto ko, isasagasa ko. Kung ayaw ko, uupuan ko. There are many instances to illustrate this prevailing policy under Senator Enrile and some of my colleagues, particularly Senator Pia Cayetano and Senator Joker Arroyo, may have been at the receiving end more often than the others. As for myself, being a newcomer and the youngest at that, while I was uncomfortable being shoved around every now and then, I gamely took everything as part of the learning process and figured that's just how it is here in this august chamber. I am a very patient man. Well, not necessarily before the August or the Oakwood incident in 2003, but 7.5 years in prison can do that to you sometimes. But one incident a couple of months ago jolted me into the realization that this shabby treatment and even shabbier policy should not be tolerated anymore. Last July 24, a day after the President's SONA, a caucus was called at the Senate President's office. We were not informed of the agenda, so I assumed right away that it was probably about something really important. Eventually, of course, I learned that the principal item on the agenda was not about national security or even of national significance. It was about the local bill on the division of the province of Camarines Sur. Without elaborating on the details of what happened in that caucus, suffice to say that I was shoved aside for the end time. Ito na naman po, kung gusto ko, isasagasa ako. I got out of that caucus feeling trampled upon by a bully determined to get his way. My neophyte instincts were telling me then to just keep the peace and get out of his way. But then, the public servant in me just couldn't let this thing pass. As a matter of public policy, dividing provinces or carving out new ones is not beneficial to the state or the people of the affected province. Otherwise, let's just divide all the big provinces for as long as they meet the requirements as provided for in law, and we'd probably end up with around 200 provinces in total. A few exceptions could be when there are two distinct and warring tribes occupying one province, or when a province is composed of two large islands that are administratively cumbersome. But in the case of Camarines Sur, neither of these conditions are present or is present. Of course, there is the cap-out, we should let the people decide argument. I've heard this from the Senate President several times, that I was almost convinced that he actually believed it. Almost. Because if he really does, then I would immediately initiate the division of his Cagayan province and expect him to have the same zeal and vigor that he has in rushing this bill. This argument, if allowed to be the basis for the approval of this bill, will henceforth reduce the whole process of succeeding similar bills from the committee hearings, interpellations, and up to the third reading as a mere ministerial duty of the Committee on Local Government and the Senate. Because at the end of the day, if anyone would oppose, somebody would just say, we should let the people decide. In my limited understanding of my job description, that is not why we are here. If, as a Senator of the Republic, as a representative of the people, you see that something is patently detrimental to the interest of the state, in this case the province and the public, you should not let it pass, or at the very least oppose it. This is the essence of a representative democracy. Then again, our Senate President is a very smart man, and I know for sure that he knows this. But with his kung gusto ko, isasagasa ko policy, he will use such arguments if he finds it convenient. Now, this is the sad part. Everyone in this august chamber knows that this bill is gerrymandering in its worst kind, particularly one that would provide for new elective positions to accommodate 2 3-term congressmen. But if it were so, why would our Senate President be particularly interested to the point of straining relations with members of the very Senate that he leads? Is it just to please Congressman Villafuerte? And why would he rush it to the point of dictating on a chief of staff of a fellow senator on what his principal should do and when he should schedule his committee hearings? Worse, our Senate President didn't even cancel the session at the height of the Habagat rains when all government agencies already did, just so this bill could be tackled. The Senate President even said that this bill should be passed immediately to relieve him of the pressure. What? The great Senator Enrile could be pressured? I remember him saying otherwise during the last impeachment proceedings. Is the pressure coming from Congressman Villafuerte, who we often see loitering about at the Senator's Lounge, the Senate President's office, and even personally lobbying to senators while we are in session? As persistent as Congressman Villafuerte is, I doubt if our Senate President would be pressured by him. Annoyed probably, but not pressured. Of course, President Aquino cannot possibly be the source of the pressure since this bill isn't even in the President's legislative agenda. I kept on looking for a possible explanation for our Senate President's irrational behavior, and it finally came in the form of a news report by Ms. Cristina Mendez of the Philippine Star dated September 6, 2012. In the report, Ms. Mendez source revealed that it was Congresswoman and former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo who personally called up the Senate President to speed up the measure. This information was also validated by one of our colleagues. With this totally unexpected twist, everything seemed to fall into place. Now there remain only 2 possibilities: that our Senate President is deeply indebted to GMA, or that he is a GMA lackey. Either way, I have lost trust, faith, and confidence in Senator Enrile's capability to lead the Senate along the path consistent with the reform agenda that I espouse. I therefore manifest that I am leaving the majority and consequently joining the minority effective this day. Thank you.
So I would like to ask questions from gentlemen. Session suspended. May I ask some questions from the gentleman, if he can
Excuse me,
answer?
session is resumed. The Senate President is recognized.
Well, I can very well understand the purpose of this privileged speech. Today, somebody in this chamber was in the headlines for meddling in foreign affairs, and probably this is one way to camouflage it. But just to set the record straight, this is the first time in my whole career as a senator that I was accused of railroading or pressuring people in the Senate. Isn't it a fact, Your Honor, that you appeared in that caucus late? Do you remember what time you arrived in that caucus?
Yes,
When we were all there?
Yes, Mr. President. I arrived there late,
Yes.
but I arrived early enough to capture the essence of what was talked about.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. President.
And we were discussing about the timetable to be undertaken regarding the division of the province of Camarines Sur.
Yes, Mr. President.
Correct?
Correct, Mr. President.
And there was Congressman Villafuerte in the room.
Yes,
correct?
Mr. President. Correct.
And at the time you entered, the one talking was the chairman of the Finance Committee, Senator Franklin Drilon, correct?
Yes, correct, Mr. President.
And do you remember what was being discussed at that time?
The timeline
Correct.
regarding the bill, Mr.
And
President.
that was the reason why Congressman Villafuerte was asked to enter the room because I did not know about the timeline that he was talking about. And you did not know this because you were late.
Yes, Mr. President, but I don't see the relevance of the point you're making right now because I hardly touched on the details of the caucus, Mr. President. Because I believe the details
Well,
of what
I
happened
am
in
asking
caucus
questions.
was
I don't
irrelevant.
think you know the rules. I
Yes,
can ask you anything under the sun. I'm going to ask some more questions about you.
yes, Mr.
All right.
President. Then I will answer.
Then just
that,
answer my
that's irrelevant.
question,
Yes,
please.
Mr. President.
If you are a gentleman, and I assume that you are, answer my questions.
Yes, Mr. President.
Now, isn't it that at that point, it was Senator Drilon who was discussing the timeline with Congressman Villafuerte when you entered the room?
Yes, Mr. President.
And did I say anything to pressure you to favor one side or the other?
Precisely, Mr. President. That's not the point. After Senator Drilon spoke, I registered my opposition on the bill, and the Senate President brushed me off.
Well-
Sani, okay na ito, Mr.
Well,
President.
your opposition should have been registered here because we are going to vote here anyway. And that
Yes.
was a caucus. We have already agreed on the timeline. And if you remember, the gentleman from Camarines Sur, Congressman Villafuerte, was pleading with us to just have the hearing conducted because they were running on a very, very tight schedule. And as President of the Senate, it was my duty to hear everybody. And that's why precisely I could not decide the issue because I'm not like that. I have to present it to the members of the Senate in a caucus. And whatever is decided by the caucus, I abide by it, even during impeachment. Were you not present in these caucuses? Is there any instance where I ask you or any one of you to vote according to my wishes?
Mr. President,
I'm asking you a question.
That's irrelevant from this. I can cite several instances.
You know, it's irrelevant because
Yes.
you are telling falsehoods here.
I take exception to that statement.
I
Mr.
am
President.
saying you are telling falsehoods here
Well,
because there are records of our proceedings.
Well, Mr. President,
All right.
okay.
Isn't it a fact that you are angry at me because you were asking me for an additional budget for your oversight committee and I did not allow it?
No, that is a falsehood,
All
Mr.
right.
President.
Okay, but the record is
Which
such
record?
now.
Which record, Mr. President? Which record, Mr. President? Can, if you want, if you are actually daring this representation, Mr. President, for us to take out the list that detailed the actual budget for all the oversight, we can go there, but I'm not inclined to, Mr. President.
You know, Mr. Senator, I was the one who took you out of the rut where you were imprisoned in Camp Crame. I never did this before. I went out of my way to talk to people so that you can get back here in the Senate, and I guaranteed your presence here. But I'm not saying this because
Precisely
I want
you're
you
saying
to
it, Mr.
owe
President.
any favor to me. I'm just putting that on record to show the character of each one